This is Hindsight in High Heels, conversations for women who have lived, learned, and are still becoming. We explore life transitions, leadership, and how perspectives evolve over time. I'm Anne Witkavitch. Thanks for joining. Today I'm joined by Melissa Delin, a communications leader and career coach who was also a colleague of mine in our corporate communications world. So welcome, Melissa.
Thank you, Anne. It's so good to be with you. I've never been on a podcast before, so this is an exciting new first. And then I would like to think that we're going to be as smooth as NPR hosts, but we'll have to see what happens.
I, I think that's an aspiration. It's a goal
I
we
mean,
can.
the bar is high since we're two communicators, but
It is. I keep thinking about that. And just truth be told, this is my first venture into podcasting. So, it's MVP all the way, minimal viable product. We're learning as we
absolutely.
go along, but I really appreciate you being here. We had recently met at the Museum of Fine Art in Boston,
Mhm.
and we got a chance to sit and talk over a couple of cappuccinos. And we were talking about what's next, not just in terms of next role, but also what's the next right step. And that conversation after really stuck with me. I thought about it a lot. And especially when we talked about like the tension between reaching for something bigger and choosing what feels more aligned. And so it's one of those questions. I don't think you only get it once in your life or career. I think it comes back over and over again. When you think about what's next, especially at a moment where momentum and possibility are both present, how do you discern whether to pursue something that's bigger, something that's different, or something more aligned?
Such a big question, right? I guess, if I look back over my life, I don't know that I have been all that intentional about choosing what's next. I mean, I feel like I am the kind of person who finds my way through things and things find their way to me. So, in a lot of ways, I think what's next has been sort of what's been presented to me as an opportunity, you know?
Mm,
Um, I think as I move through my life, the part about both being intentional and also listening to what alignment is and kind of asking questions of myself, like, why do I feel like I should be where I am? And if I don't, why is that? And if I do, am I pursuing that or am I not? So it kind of everything kind of gets to a deeper place where you're getting to know yourself along the way. So I really wouldn't change anything about my journey. If anything, I'm just kind of thinking about how to really live in that discernment place.
oh, that's great. Yeah. I think the whole term about self awareness really comes up over and over again, from your career background and as well as mine, and a lot of conversations with women is around this idea of self awareness. But
Mhm.
I do think some people, self awareness, I guess here's a question. Is self awareness learned? Is it something you think some people are born with a little bit more lean towards it? Because it is really so important, because that's how you get to the core of a lot of these questions is what's your self-awareness and how do you feel that within yourself?
Yeah. I love these questions. I think that self awareness is learned in some ways. I think that we are born with some level of self awareness. I think that our upbringings and the things that happen to us can either put us more or less in touch with ourselves. I think that, as we sort of move through our lives and we process either big traumas, small traumas, learn lessons, regrets, triumphs, kind of the trials of life. Like I said, I think that sometimes people are really wanting to confront things in their life and heal from them. And I think other people kind of go toward, like numbing out or not facing those things, and I think you're gonna see a split, right? Where you're gonna see some people go down more of a self-awareness path and others that maybe that get away from that a little bit, and I think that there's quite a bit of, there's quite a bit of difference about where you end up depending on which of those paths you choose.
That's really true, and I think it probably also leans into extrinsic or intrinsic. Like if you are a person who are internally driven and self-aware, or you're a person who's externally driven, I think it's what you're saying about you have a little bit more of a path. I want to
Mhm.
like confine it, but you have a little bit more path or direction of where you want to go.
Yeah. Yeah, building on that, I mean, the internal and the external, like the intrinsic and extrinsic, it's so fascinating, right? Because the world is going to give you signals, right? The world is going to appear
Yes.
friendly or unfriendly, A, depending on how you meet it, and B, depending on what happens to you, right? So I think if you're looking always externally, you're going to get a lot of signals that may or may not help and motivate you, I think and I think so on the inside, same thing, you can have self-limiting beliefs that are actually holding you back, or you can really be, kind of, in touch with the things that you are naturally gifted to do, the things that you're naturally called to do. This is a really it's getting toward discernment and intention, right? Because like, the
Yes.
more you're in touch with your natural abilities, strengths, gifts, and the things that actually bring you fulfillment, you're taking more of your signals from the internal world rather than the external world, and I think that that helps you sort of filter what signals you wanna keep and which ones you wanna let pass you by.
What happens when a signal conflicts with where you think, even being self-aware, you think you were heading,
Yeah,
but then the signals start to change? And I do believe that happens at different points in life,
yeah,
that we think we're on. I used to do a talk, and I used to talk about life isn't linear, that we tend to think we have a linear path, but there's different toll gates along the way, that
yeah.
something may shift that we never expected, or maybe it was unexpected to begin with. So, what do you think about that in terms of those signals? What happens to you when a signal comes in and it's signaling you something that you weren't expecting?
Oh, God, this goes into such big stuff, actually. If I look at my own life, I feel like a lot of the signals that I got early on came from programming in a way and the expectations of my parents, right? And so, I mean, I think if I look at the first 30, 35 years of my life, I think I was very much the eldest daughter, very much about making my parents proud, doing the things that they wanted me to do. So some of it, I mean, a lot of it was shaped by generations of, how things happen in my family. So the expectation was I would go to college, I would get a good job, I would, get health insurance and do all those things, and I would get married and buy a house. And so it was a very traditional path that I feel like I was set on, and for many, many years, I operated within that frame, right? And I did all those things. Luckily, I was happy about a lot of the choices that I was making within that frame of expectation, and that included, buying the house, like, getting married, having a kid, all of that. And then there was a time, kind of in my mid 30s, where I sort of hit the nuclear option, and I moved away from a lot of those early choices. I mean, I think this is a place where we can be real and truthful and authentic, not to use an overused word. But I actually found a lot more freedom after that happened. After I kind of broke out of the mold, I felt like that was where I really started learning. That was where I really started growing. I definitely went through an individual and like a personal transformation, both physical, mental, emotional. And now that I have kind of a decade on the other side of that, I can look back and say that was potentially the best thing that I ever did, was to like really kind of screw up in the eyes of my parents. Not that they never called me a screw up. They never looked at it
Right,
that way,
right,
but it
yeah.
was it was rebelling against that, that good daughter mold.
That's interesting, and when that happened, at the point it happened, was it scary? Was it bold? I mean, was it a mix of a lot of different emotions?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I mean, it was, and I was willing at that time to face the uncertainty of what I didn't know than to persist with the reality that I did know. So I was willing to take what I was willing to move through and roll with whatever life was going to bring rather than stay in a life that I felt like I could predict up until the end, you know?
Yeah.
It gave me I had this sort of sneaking sense that I wasn't living enough. I wasn't living big enough. I wasn't thinking big enough. And I wasn't learning and growing enough. I felt like I was sort of stagnating. And, so that I'm talking about my personal life, but I feel like that was also true of both my personal life, not relationships, but like, my how I was actually spending my time. And then eventually there was a reckoning with how I was spending my working time too. So like everything changed. And I mean, it's been awesome. Actually, it's been a ride, and I've loved it.
which is great to be able to reflect back and say that,
Yeah.
because that's inclusive of the ups and downs that come with that type of a transition and a transformation.
Yeah.
When it's interesting because you mentioned, again, that self-awareness, kind of having that freedom to make choices and all. Did you go through any kind of a process? Did you have any tools? Did you have anything that helped you kind of focus in on what that change was as it was happening? Conversations with other people? I mean, like, what were some of the toolkit, if you will? Not to overuse that term either, but,
Yeah.
what were some of the things you did to help ride that ride that wave to transformation?
I think it was more about the signals. I think the universe started sending me signals both in the form of kind of a discontent within me, right? So there was that sort of yearning, like, is this all there is? Like, I mean, some people might call it like midlife crisis kind of feeling. It is this. I think everyone reaches that question of, is this all there is? So there was that. I think that there were certain things that I always wanted to do in my life that I hadn't done, and I couldn't necessarily see a future where I would do those things, on my current path. So there was a little bit of like, there's another version of me that I could become, and I could step into, even though that didn't feel realistic either. But that felt aspirational. It felt like something that I wanted to do, even if I didn't know how to get there. So maybe that was a little bit of intention setting, whether I recognized it at the time or not. And then I just watched my friends and other people that I knew go through stuff and go through big stuff. And they lived their lives in a way or a different order than the way that I did. And I watched all those stories unfold, and I watched people go through their own ups and downs. And I thought, I think a life of ups and downs ultimately may be more important to have than a straight, steady line across. I think I saw a lot of value in the struggle, and then, like, really a lot of advice that you hear made more sense, like, it's the journey, not the destination. Like, some of those things feel like empty platitudes until you start living it, and then you're like, "Oh, that's what they
Yeah.
mean?"
No, that's a terrific point. And it goes back to life is linear, and what you described, it's I think we start out and we think it's this flat surface. That's how I like to think about it. And it's interesting that you said midlife crisis because that term is used so much. And
So
I
much.
remember when I launched Press Pause Now and did the Press Pause Moments book on women in transitions, and it was interesting because so many people assumed it was a midlife transition book. And I said, no, this is about the transitions we go through, both planned or unexpected, good and bad, that happen to us as women all the way through our life cycle. So it's the arc of our, you and I are writers, the arc of our stories go
Mhm.
up and down, and that you don't realize that, I think, until later in a lot of cases, that talk about destination. A midlife crisis isn't a destination. It's not even really a crisis per se. It's just that you're in a different point in your life and things change and you look at things a little differently. And I think that's where values come in too,
Yeah.
because we have our values, but then values can also get reprioritized, or the values can just take on different nuances as we go through different phases of our lives and our careers.
I think my values have I think my I mean, my core values I think have stayed the same, but I think some of the values that I in the way that I choose to live them have evolved. And you actually reminded me of something as you were just, as you were talking about and referring to the fact that we're both writers. One of the things that happened, one of the big signals or one of the big like kind of messages that I was getting was through a writing project. So there was a time in my life when I was working a full time job. I had a 2-year old and I was writing a novel. That seems like it would be the
That's
most.
all?
That's it, right? Yeah, I mean, oh wait, and I was also in grad school. So I was doing all these things at once. It is so implausible to do those things at the same time. I mean, yes, I had to put the book aside a little bit while I was doing that stuff because it was a 6-year project getting the book written. But there's a couple of important things. One is that, at the time it felt like doing all those things at once it made sense. That was just what I was doing. I was just very driven, like I felt like on every level. But the really interesting thing is that the book that I was writing was about a divorce, and it was inspired by watching my friend go through a divorce, but it was before my own divorce. So it was almost like a life imitating art thing where I was almost playing with the ideas before they felt like they were mine. They belonged to my characters. They belonged to my friend. I mean, I sort of like went very deep on this topic. And I do I will also set up another concept that I think we'll come back to, which is the idea of breadth and depth, right? So sometimes we
Right.
do things that are more about breadth, and sometimes we do things that are more about depth. I think I think we will come back to that. But anyway, like writing the book and going on somebody else's journey, that was one of the things that that kind of aided me along the way, where it was like I was just again like sort of playing with these concepts before I realized they were actually mine.
We've talked about this, I think, before because I had similar that I I didn't interrupt my career, but I made the decision to transition companies and went back to grad school for my
Yeah,
MFA.
yeah.
And, I've written about this before, but it was the first time in a long time I had been frightened because I really went to the MFA for the first residency. And I really thought they were going to pull me aside at dinner and tell me that they had made a mistake and I wasn't supposed to be there. And I hadn't felt like that in such a long time. Not that's a great feeling, but it meant that that was something really important to me. And it was, again, the learning and self awareness of a talent I had that I hadn't really embraced in all of its dimensions.
Mhm.
And so, and again, that happened at a very different point in life. Little kids, big job still. Yeah, I often think I think about how did I do things 5 years ago, never mind now. So
We do
but
a lot.
it is part of the process and the journey and how you go along and maybe I never wanna have regrets, but one thing I think about is I wish I had been a little kinder to myself through that it all does work out. You wish you could know that.
Yeah.
But it's that feeling you had said the signals, and the signal was so strong that that was what I was supposed to do at that point in time.
I love that for you, and that actually sort of prompts like it does. I think it depends what also helps you is what is your natural inclination. Are you a glass half full person naturally, or are you a glass half empty person naturally? Because that is going to color how much fear you have. It's gonna, if you're a naturally optimistic person, then you will gravitate naturally to the idea that things will work out. I mean, that's kind of what that means, right? So if you believe that things will work out, then I think that sort of allows you to take bigger risks, and trust that, kind of like tubing down a river, like you kind of
Mhm.
trust that it's going to take you somewhere and it's not going to be dangerous to, to like weather a few rapids because then you're going to end up in the nice clear pool. Wow, look at me like metaphoring. Um, but if and I don't want to,
Metaphors are great.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you think that you're a glass half full person? It seems like it.
I'm a very much a glass, half full person. I'm also I also have a lot of drive and motivation and ambition in a good way. I mean, just
Yeah.
it's really about, from a self-awareness perspective, it's really about understanding what I'm really good at,
Absolutely.
understanding what I'm not good at, and what I don't care that I'm not good at, and what I would like to get better at.
I
So,
think that's awesome.
storytelling, I mean, you know this already, I think, but,
Yeah.
uh, there was a comic book workshop in my town.
Mhm.
I was the oldest person there by many, many decades because a lot of, young people from the local schools came. It was wonderful, but it was all about storytelling in a different way, visual. So we can always be learning, and I think that is something that when you're thinking about what's next, like, is it bigger? Is it different? Is it aligned? It could cross over all 3.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be one or the other, but it starts to that curiosity and that willingness to keep learning and developing and
Mhm.
trying different things, I think is so, so important. Trying
I do
this
too.
podcast, I never did a podcast before, and I'm producing one, but
I know it's so brave and bold that you're doing that. Yeah, exactly what you're saying. I can pinpoint. I can or I can s I can tell you what that has looked like at different times of my life. So when I was a student, like when I was in school, in college, I was always the kind of student who, if I was interested in the topic or if the subject or the class, I put tons of effort into it. And if I was not interested, or if it was something that I'd put in the bucket of I'm not good at this, I did not put nearly as much effort. Right. So to me, I guess my inclinations were strong. Like, I knew that I was really good at English. I knew that I was good at writing and reading, and that I loved that. I was, like, always, a voracious reader when I was a kid, so it was just obvious where I wanted to spend my time and what I was good at versus algebra and math. I was not good at that, and I went to summer school for it, and I had my aunt tutor me through it, and it was that was the class that I would have the nightmares about, that, like, "Oh, I haven't gone all semester, and now it's the final, and I don't know anything." I just never had those experiences, in either English class or art class. So, like, I definitely knew what I was good at that time. And then as my career unfolded, I turned that, both of us, we turned in those into communications careers and, went to school for that. And that, had the same kind of thing, like the very high drive, ambitious years where it was get promotions and make a certain amount of money and, kind of like grab all the brass rings that were in front of me. And it's amazing how the time within the last 10 years making a change, one of them has been making the transition from that corporate communications career into career coaching, right? So that's, what I'm doing now. And the focus of practically every conversation I have is, what are you good at naturally? What do you want? What do you not want? Right? So it's all these same questions, and I'm helping other people grapple with them instead of myself. But I mean, it was definitely a really big moment to be offered a promotion and to have a very strong pull inside that I didn't want it, I mean, because I had always wanted it before. And so to not want it, and to say no to that, and to have that lead to a total career detour. I mean, I don't think it's like I won't go back at some point, but it would have to look different. It would have to feel right. But I know for sure that saying no to that opportunity was the thing that propelled me into a questioning place and into what I'm doing now.
and isn't saying no so difficult? I mean, we talk about that so much. How do you say no to taking on a new project or, uh, volunteering for something? But it's no. when it's a decision of how the path is gonna go forward, it's like, not to do another metaphor, but it's like, deciding, do I take the scenic route? Bec do we take the scenic route, or do you stay on the highway? Do you anticipate traffic? Like, whatever
Yeah.
it is, you're thinking about that path, and it's a really brave, courageous thing to say no. And I like to call it, especially for women, I like to call that because brave and courageous is something often you're doing without a safety net underneath you.
Mm,
And I'm not saying anyone has, like, all people have a safety net, but it's that you have to really think, because I do think there's conditions put on if you do veer off that sometimes it's a little harder to get back on,
mhm.
the path. And so when you're when you're looking at this and you think about saying no, one of the things I find interesting, and I've, again, my own experience, but yours has been, you went into career coach. You said you recognize what you're good at, but the skills you have as a communication professional end up falling so well in. I started teaching, which I never expected to do at the university level, and the opportunity came up after my MFA, and you have turned into this career that you're bringing so much value to the people that you're working with, because not only of your professional background and that career journey, but the skills that you acquired over the years.
Yeah. I think I just had a profound thought based on what you just said. I am not I wouldn't say that I'm good at saying no. I think that I'm very good at saying yes to something because it resonates with me, and the no kind of falls out of that. I wouldn't say that I have a strong I'm not a person who has set strong boundaries. I think that I have a bit of a pleaser mentality, and so, I mean, and I've had it confirmed by psychics, right? So, I mean, this is such a silly thing, but, like, it is a thing that I know about myself. I am much more inclined to want to please people and be a good my boyfriend calls me a good go-alonger. So, I know that I have more of a yes-oriented, harmonious, like, harmony, peace creating, non-confrontational, non-competitive way of being, but that means that if I'm drawn to certain things, then the no's fall into that area of, like, well, I'm just not interested in this anymore. So I don't go around saying no. I go around saying yes to some things, and like I said, the no just sort of happens on the back end. But I mean, you're reminding me that, like, in doing that, you are saying no. You're saying yes to something, and you're saying no, whether it's directly or indirectly, to something else. And I realized, I did that when I said no to the promotion, because what I said was, I really love the role that I have. I want to stay in it. So it's not like I said, hell no, take this job and, shove
Yeah,
it. It
right,
wasn't that at
right.
all. It was saying, I love what I'm doing already. And so thank you for thinking of me, but that's not a move I want to make right now. I want to stay doing what I'm doing. I think that I'm doing it well, and I think that it really matters, in terms of where we are. So that may be, like, a longer answer than you're looking for there, but that I know that I'm more of a yes person.
I think it was, I think it was a good answer. I think it was a great answer, because what you touched upon, I can sit here and be like, "Oh, it sounds like you're courageous and brave." I'm the same way. I mean, who am I kidding? I can be very, very definitive in some ways, but then other ways it's hard. And my husband warns me all the time, manage your time, manage your time. Do one thing and do it really well.
Yeah.
So I understand that there is a pull, and I'm also a perfectionist. So,
I bet.
that falters into there too.
Yeah.
But I think what you said is that it's again, it goes back to self-awareness. I want to keep on that one, but it's so important that we know, we're aware when we say yes and we say we should have said no, or when we say no and it's like, oh, I had a situation where I had to decide 2 opportunities and I went with one, and it was hard because in some ways I think the other one would have had benefits or pros in one way,
Yeah.
but the one I took fulfilled what I needed at that point in time. And both would have been fine. Both had risk involved with taking it, but you made the best decision. That's something I've learned as I've gotten older and farther along in my career, is to be able to be, or to show myself grace. I love that
Mhm.
expression, for thinking through. And a lot of times the decision isn't an easy one. You have to pick a path and go it. And if something veers off, you have to then just get back on track to something else. So
It can be hard. I mean, I think if you are a yes-oriented person and yes and is your natural inclination, it can be hard because that leaves a lot of room for a lot of possibilities. I mean, sometimes I wish I were more of a black and white thinker because I think I would make quicker decisions. I think that, I wouldn't be always looking at, like, 5 possibilities and wondering about that path, the 4 paths that you can't take because you can only choose one. I suppose now I feel more trusting that that choosing one path doesn't mean excluding all other things. It just means that something else may find you later on. But I also think, I think that being a yes person, a yes and type of person really does, it's important in what we do. It's important to be as a communicator. It's important when you're a teacher, and it's important when you're a coach because you're a smart person interacting with other smart people, and you both have good ideas. And as a senior communications person, as well as I do that you're advising a leader or an executive. You're in a world where there's more than one way to do things.
yes,
You're not choosing. There's no one right way, and you have to guess what it is. You have to feel your way through with that person, and at the same time, you have to also be able to influence them based on your best judgment and get them to see your point. So you cannot cut off their ideas. You have to synthesize the stuff that's good and help them see where, maybe can I advocate for a position here that I think will work really well for you. And I do the same thing when I'm working one-on-one with people, very smart people, who know a lot more than I do about what they do.
yes.
So the best thing is to help somebody really step into their strengths and see their value and show up to every conversation that they're in, knowing that they did the best they could, that they were as prepped as they could, that they can't orchestrate the outcome. Same thing in the comms world. You can put out really good communication, but you can't guarantee that it's going to be received the way that you want it to, that there's probably a lot of follow-up and care and tending that you have to do because the world is messy and change is messy. And there's a lot going on the surface of oh no, sorry, there's a lot going on below the surface of every person, that you're
Yeah,
communicating to. And the same thing happens when you're in a job hunt or something like that, something that sort of, kind of sends you mixed messages about your value, sends
yeah.
you have to confront your ego in that kind of thing. Like nothing that we do in life is clean, I don't think. I mean, it's messy, and that I think is where all the learning is. But anyway, I mean, the world has a lot of possibilities if you want to I think we want to stay open to those, and it is kind of hard to close off certain paths because you have to choose and move.
I think it's great how you said life is messy and it's not clean. Every experience we have, we learn from it. And that's something I've taken through my career.
Mhm.
I was gonna be a doctor originally. That's what I went to school for. I realized those science and chemistry and calc classes were not my
Yeah.
forte. And that's what happened. I just really kind of geared towards English degree, but I had no
Mhm.
idea what I was gonna do when I got out with that. So it was a lot of knowing myself and learning and going along the way. So that's okay, and it's okay if you do have a career path, if you've chosen something and you really wanna go it and you just know what the formula is and you go forward, and, those are wonderful too, and it's such an individual thing.
Mhm.
For me, it's don't ever feel that you're supposed to be. You talked about the traditional with your parents and everything, which is pretty common, but don't ever feel that you need to be what other people have that impression of you being, that it really is about what you want, and you may not know what it is, but it's part of the experience of figuring that out. So we're coming to the close. I have 2 more questions for you. The first
Okay.
one is, just in summary, as you look back on your career so far, what have you learned about yourself in addition to what you've shared here that really helps you hone in and recognize what that next right step is going to be?
I have learned to trust that the right next step will find me. It is my job to be open, to be relentlessly curious, and to follow that curiosity into the places that I'm most interested in. And there's a saying about the what happens at the intersection of preparedness and opportunity. Like that's where the
Mhm.
magic happens. I don't remember exactly how it's worded, but I love that. So I feel like part of it is your job to, like I said, to be open, and part of your job is to be ready to receive what's coming your way. Right. So I mean, I've also heard it said like you're an open mailbox for blessings, right? So
That's
to me,
nice.
that's important to do things. And so I think that actually kind of brings us full circle back to listening to yourself, right? It's very simple. If you're doing the thing that you're meant to do, it's going to feel right. You're not going to have a whole lot of questions because it's just going to feel right. And if you're not feeling like it's right, then you have to ask yourself, like, what am I responding to? Am I responding to programming? Is it family stuff? Is it, kind of getting caught up in the Kool-Aid of like, oh, I should always be growing my career and building my empire? Because we get a lot of messages at work too. And so you have to kind of figure out like where is the conflict? Is my soul telling me something different and that's why I'm feeling conflicted? And so I guess, the more you cultivate self-awareness and the more you're curious about yourself as well as the world around you, the more you're going to know whether you're in the right place or not. And so I guess that coupled with the trust means that the right people, the right situations, the right opportunities are going to find you once you are ready to receive them.
That's great. And the final question is really geared for the women who are listening, who may be feeling that momentum building right now.
Mhm.
How can they tell the difference between external expectation and internal clarity? Again, you've covered a lot of this, but what would be your nugget that you want to leave them with?
I can only say what's worked for me, which is a lot of journaling. I think that I find it very self therapizing. I think you just kind of lay out everything that you're thinking and feeling with no judgment, right? So give yourself grace for whatever you say. I think that asking why about everything that you're putting in there, like, why do I feel this way? Where is this coming from? Like, so asking a lot of why questions will get you somewhere. And I also think that there is obviously, kind of a change process and a change curve, and that a lot of the time is spent in the contemplation of change phase before actual change happens. And so if you feel like you are caught or stalled out in the contemplation of change phase and not for whatever reason, like not ready to take action, or the clarity is not there, you don't quite know what you want, give yourself permission to stay there and keep asking yourself, what's going on here? Why am I feeling the way I feel? Because you will surprise yourself with the insights that you surface, and you may find things that you need to heal or take care of or declutter, or like things that you need to invite into your life or get out of your life. But yeah, I mean, turn your curiosity on to yourself. And I think be brave in confronting yourself. I mean, it's amazing. You have
I
to kind of be your own best friend in life.
that's wonderful guidance. I am so happy you brought up about journaling because as we were talking, I was thinking, oh, this is where the notebook comes in. I call it keeping my notebook, but it's amazing when you write it down. And recently I went back and reread like 5 to 7 years worth of notebooks.
I
I
do that
almost read
too.
it like a book. I had
Yeah.
not done that, but I said, "I'm not gonna reread." And I actually saw the threads going through and things where I am now, where I saw where there was conflicting thought or confusion of what I wanted to do or decisions, how the process went and how it ended up in the place it should be.
That
So
is
it's a
fascinating.
fascinating. I think when you write it too, it just helps with the stress levels to,
Yeah.
you know, to kind of put it out there.
I
But
know we're wrapping
anyhow,
up.
yeah,
I'm just gonna validate what you said. I also keep a journal. I look back like, a year, 2 years, and there are certain things that I'm like, "Oh, I'm still grappling with that." And then other things where I go, "Oh, yeah, look where I was a year ago, and now that's resolved in the past." So, I mean, it's a fascinating thing.
it really is. It really is. So Melissa, I want to say thank you so much for being here, for your honesty, for your openness, and then for this conversation. It's been wonderful. And thank you to everyone who is listening. This is Hindsight and High Heels.
Thanks, Anne. It's been a pleasure.